Welcome back to On the Fly. We're previewing the predicting and recapping World Junior Championships, our Men's World Championships, the Women's World Championship, the U18 Men's World Championship. Expect the unexpected.
Absolute abomination of the Canadian Junior Nationals.
I have a couple extra words I want to use on that one. And it's Freebird. Freebird. Of course, the Olympics are just around the corner. I'm going to coin it the rivalry day.
World Junior History!
Your home for international hockey. This is On the Fly. Hello everybody, and welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're going to be watching this Sweden and Latvia qualifying round action game together. If you have not already, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to leave your comment down below in our live chat. Let me know who you think is going to come out today with the win. Will Latvia be able to pull off an impressive upset over the Swedes? Or is the favorite Sweden about to go and meet their match with the USA? Please do let me know in the chat box below. But once again, some pretty interesting games have already gone on today, as we will move over now to our playoff picture. And I think there's no better place to start today than in this playoff picture. Obviously, some big wins today. You look at the Czechs taking down Denmark earlier today with a 3-2 win. That was a tight game, and one that obviously was a little bit more expected, but you look at these two teams pretty close on paper. They're going to go up against a real tough team in Canada coming up. Whether or not they can get through that still remains to be seen, but I do think that you look at the way that the Czechs are built, there is the potential. Yes, history not necessarily on their side, but they are right there with them. And so we'll see whether or not for this Czech squad this year, if they're going to be able to pull off that huge upset against the Canadians. The Canadians red hot at this tournament. Some pretty clear-cut favorites, especially early on in this tournament. Should become a pretty interesting game there. The other games from today, the ones in the early morning, we did see Switzerland take down Italy. A 3-0 win over the Italians for the Swiss. And even this game, I'd say, was a bit more of that tight battle that the Swiss were somewhat expecting. You look at this Swiss team, they played France earlier in the tournament, not necessarily expected to end up taking anything in this tournament, being a lower team in Group A. They go and they upset the Czechs, find their way through, and now right where they need to be in that quarterfinal round against the Finns, and maybe they'll be able to pull off the upset along the way. You can also look over at the other qualifying round game from today with Germany taking down France, the 5-1 win. This one, a bit more of that back and forth type game, but the Germans just that better team, and that was the difference in today's games. Once again, a 5-1 victory for Germany over France, and that's pretty much what's already gone on today. Big one today between Sweden and Latvia. A reminder that whichever team does end up taking this game will end up playing the USA in the quarterfinals. And I see everyone in the chat. Just so you know, we will not be able to show the game today, but we will be having our live coverage for it. We'll be giving you our play-by-play, but no official game stream will be on. Unfortunately, copyright has been pretty hard at this tournament, and it's going to be tough to even find a stream for it. So unfortunately, not going to be able to show it today, but be sure to stick around because we have a fair share of content coming. And you look kind of ahead, and I'd say even more so now, you look kind of quarterfinals and beyond. We have 3 quarterfinal matchups already set, Canada and the Czechs, slight edge to Canada, but this Czech team, they played extremely well today against the Danes. I really like to see Pastrnak back alongside Cervenka. I think that was a crucial part to that Czech run back when they won the World Championships back in 2024. And you're going to look to those two guys to really lead this charge for the Czech team. And you have some more depth scoring with your line spread out. You're going to need it against a real tough Canadian team. We'll see whether or not they're going to be able to pull off the upset on that one. As well, the Finns are taking on Switzerland. This game is another one that is very tight. And yes, the Swiss, not necessarily the best start to this tournament. They played okay. They lost to Canada in a relatively large margin game. But at the same time, you look at their game against the Finns and the game against the Swiss and the Finns, two teams that I'd say the Finns kind of where they wanted to be. They got their quarterfinal bye. Yes, they had a bit of a tough time against the Slovaks, but For the Finns, they are where they need to be. They're going up against the Swiss team that they should be able to beat. The slight edge should go to the Finns, but this game is one of those more toss-up type games. Wouldn't surprise me to see it go either way. And then, of course, over to the other quarterfinal, Slovakia and Germany, the coin flip of all coin flips, where even more so this game could go either which way. And for the Slovaks, a team that's been hot at this tournament, a huge win over Finland in the opener, followed up with a bit of a testy game against the Italians, and then they come out and, of course, get their one goal that they needed in the last 30 or 40, 50 seconds of their game against the Swedes, find themselves into that quarterfinal bye spot. Then from there, they're going to play the Germans, who have kind of been building up throughout this tournament, so we will see whether or not they are going to be able to pull off that huge upset. And then, of course, once again, one more quarterfinal still to be made. Sweden and Latvia. The winner will go on to play the USA, as we do now switch back to our game zone graphics. Obviously, we have the one game that just finished up between the Czechs and the Danes, a 3-2 final in that one, and that was a pretty good game. And so if you're new here, haven't heard the original monologue, please do hit the like button. Please also hit the subscribe button if you have not already, and share with any of your friends, and leave your leave your score predictions down in the comments below, because it's always fun to see, and let me know who you think is going to win in our live poll chat. But we are just about to get underway here. We have a bit of an interesting game. We have a few injuries that could very well turn the tide in this one, and whether or not those are going to come in handy later in the game, and especially for the Latvians, who are one of their top forwards at this tournament, who have already been down a few injuries, obviously coming into the tournament with Rodrigo Abels and Eriks Matejko. Could be an interesting game for them on the offensive side, going up against a relatively offensive powerhouse who's been a sleeping giant so far at this tournament with the Swedes. You look to it, Jacob Markstrom in net for the Swedes, Elvis Merzlikins in net for Italy. Should be an interesting game here as we are just about to get underway. Should be a great one today. Going to be an exciting game. Two teams, upset potential with Latvia, who have always been kind of a pesky type team at these tournaments. And then they're going up against Sweden, who have had a relatively rough tournament. They struggled against the trap style with the Italians, and now we're going to see if Latvia can be that next team up and pull off one of the best upsets in recent Olympic history in quite some time. We're just about to puck drop here, so we're almost there. Stay tuned. Let's see, who is in the chat today? Oh, we have quite a few people today. Hello to everyone who's saying hi. I don't see a whole ton of score predictions quite yet. Let's see here. Latvia is winning 3-2. That could be it. I think we had a 7-2 prediction for this game for the Swedes. I do think that this game likely ends in blowout. I think it's going to be a tight game in the first period or so. And then as this one slowly but surely gets going on, we could see a bit more of that stretched out game. But should be this one. We're about to have puck drop underway here. And puck has dropped, and we are underway. The Swedes win the opening draws. Banajad with the pull. Dumped deep down into the Latvian end. Merzlikins out to play it for the Latvians. And Markstrom with the opening save of the game. And Latvia off to I guess you could say, a hot start, getting the first shot on net. We'll see if it can continue. Your chance to get some Latvian fans. Well, hopefully for our friends over in Latvia, they can pull off a great upset tonight and party into the night before they got to go play the U.S., which will be another tough game for them there. Greetings from Sweden. Sweden wins 4-3. Oh, I see a little bit more of that conflicting style now. We'll see which way that the comments decide to lean. At least Merzlikins out to play it for the Latvians here. And another icing call. Seems to be a bit more of that slow type game to get us kicked off underway here today. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, help people. Hello, Sweden winning 4-2 score. Oh, and thank you for that €2. Hello, Sweden winning 4-2 score predictions for tomorrow. I think it's going to be an interesting one tomorrow. We have a pretty competitive field. You kind of look across the board about those playoff type teams, and we'll be going into a little bit more depth at the intermission on each of those matchups, as well as starting to preview a little bit of this Sweden, Latvia, and whoever the winner ends up playing the U.S. team. Oh, and a tight play at the net nearly goes in off the start. As far as today's games go, see score predictions for tomorrow. For today, at least, I would say that the slight edge does go to the Swedes and kind of those heavy favorites coming in, but it very realistically could go either way in this one. You have two teams fairly close as far as the overall performance so far at this tournament goes. Obviously, Latvia with a big win against the Germans earlier in the tournament, but still lots of game action still to play. And when you play the Swedes, the Latvians are very much designed to go out and beat the Swedes. They play a defensive style. Swedes are more that offensive type team. So if they can shut that down early, then you very well might see that the Swedes have that trouble, start to get desperate. The longer this game goes where it's close, the better chance that the Latvians are going to have in the end. And so for Latvia, it's more of a game of trying to stay alive. We'll see whether or not they can do that in this one, but realistically, could go either way right to the very end. And also another guy I really have enjoyed so far at this term is Albert Schmitz. He's been obviously a guy going on his draft year, a lot to prove at this kind of tournament, but I think he's really held himself well so far. And you look to him as kind of that Juraj Slavkovsky type player from the 2022 tournament who earned his way up to that number one overall spot. And I think very well you could make the argument that he is a player that could move up in the draft. And I think he's kind of around the top 10 spot right now, around that 10th overall. But these kind of tournaments we've seen can really improve somebody's draft stock and put them from that 10th spot to the nearly first overall spot. What do you think? Is the Czechia-Canada rivalry real? I don't know if it's a rivalry considering you guys keep beating us every time. Like, at some point, it's no longer a rivalry. It's just a domination, right? Like, there's only so many losses we can continue to take. But like, realistically, it is a tight rivalry, and it's one that I'd say has grown over the last few years. And it started with the juniors, and it's going to continue to carry forward as these years go onwards, right? The Czechs are a team who have, and a country really, that have been on the rise these last few years, and they're getting ever so much closer to back in their glory days where they were the team to beat. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them there in a few years. A lot of young talent, and once again, it's only a matter of time for a lot of these guys, where we've seen a little bit on the North American side, but really you're starting to see that Czech talent really start to take over the NHL as far as their top players go. And it really is only a matter of time. Yes, there's a lot of good Canadians too, but when you think about it, that margin is slowly but surely diminishing. And yes, Canada beat them early on in this tournament. It's only going to be a matter of time as Latvia gets out to a 2-on-1. It's broken up. It could go, right? Like, as a Canadian, every time they play the Czechs, I am terrified. It could go very much either way. And it's just one of those type games where the Czechs play a very hard style for teams like Canada to beat because they're not used to it. They're used to playing North American teams. They're used to playing that kind of North American type style of game. And it's always a tough one between the two. Well fought each and every time, but should be an interesting one. Of course, into that in that quarterfinal now, where the Canadians probably get one of the harder teams to play in the Czechs, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off. I will say I am glad not to be playing the Swedes, who, as much as they haven't really found their best game yet, I do think that they are on the rise at these tournaments, and it's only a matter of time before they break out, whether it's today. And you'd hope for the Swedes that it's not a qualifying round exit, because that whole story about being a choker would really hurt them. But and a big play. Lachmelis on the doorstep nearly puts the rebound in. Could have been a good start for the Latvian team. Shots are 2-0 here, 4 minutes into the game, and it's a pretty balanced game so far. And I wouldn't say that that's terribly surprising. The Swedes have kind of struggled to get through that Latvian defense, but once they do, and you kind of look for that first goal to be a bit of the, as Forsberg takes a shot, saved by Merzlikins, you kind of look for the Latvians to play that kind of style of game that you get accustomed to. And they're going to play defensive. The Swedes are going to try and break through it. If they can't, then you're never going to see that offensive side go. But as soon as they get that first one, build up that little bit more confidence, realize that they don't have to try and jam it through, that's when teams like Latvia kind of begin to fall apart. So we'll see whether or not the Swedes are able to wake up. It's been a real tough tournament for them. But in many ways, they are kind of that sleeping giant of this tournament. As the Latvians ice another puck here. A 0-0 game to start this one. 14:44 left to go in the first period. Shots are 2-0 for the Latvians. Swedes yet to record their first shot on net. They've been sniffing around it, but haven't quite got it through kind of that last Latvian defender in line who ends up blocking that shot. So we'll see if they're able to kind of generate those passing plays. It's an important part for the Latvians here. What do you think about the Czechia win 3-2? The third period was scary. Dostal made a few big saves, and we were lucky, I must say. And it's fair. And I'd also say that the Czechs had their chances as well. And you always look to goaltending in those types of games as Dahlin walks in, shoots, and saves, or looks like he got blocked out front by his own player. Turnover on the offensive end. Dahlin to Forsling. Forsling shoots, misses wide. Nearly Raymond there on the backside with the tap in. And yeah, the Czechs today was a bit of a mixed bag, and they played well. They did have their chances, but once again, if you don't bury those chances, they mean nothing. And it's only a matter of time for teams like the Danes, whose main goal is, like Latvia in this one, to stay as close as you possibly can for as long as you can. And then if you stick around for too long, that's where they try and beat you, because they can win kind of a 1-0, 2-1, 3-2 game. But as soon as it gets into that more offensive side, the Latvian team, the Danish team, will save in front of the net by his Merzlikins. That one was getting close. The Swedes are starting to sniff around the net a little bit more now, getting real close to that first goal. As OEL knocks in to Nylander. Nylander passes out front and didn't quite connect there with Joel Eriksson-Ek, but getting closer, right? And it's this consistent factor whenever you play these teams is there's a balance between forcing it and playing offensive and understanding what their systems are on the other side, because they're not going to beat you offensively. But if you begin to force stuff, that's when they start to score goals, especially for a team like Latvia, who passing his own net. Wenberg saved by Merzlikins out front with 12:38 left to go in the first period here. We go to our first TV timeout. It was, I enjoyed watching it through it from I also very much enjoyed it through that kind of neutral viewpoint. But like, you look at those teams, and a team like the Danes, they've come very close at this tournament, have kind of been just on the wrong side of those margins, where whether it be their game against the U.S., which I think is probably the most notable one, where they held in with the U.S. and then towards the end they had to play more offensive, got them stretched out, kind of like we see with these kind of teams. And then you also look at the fact that you can say the same thing about their game against Germany, where in that game against Germany, the Danes were the better team and unfortunately found themselves on the wrong side of it. The game against Latvia, they played well. I wouldn't say they were the better team. I think Latvia definitely played better than the way that the Danes played, but they've always been a tough team at this tournament because they hang around. And whether they play great, whether they play poorly, they're still a team that are going to be a competitive one at this tournament. And for a team like the Czechs, who haven't really found their best game so far, they are going to be a tough one. As someone in the comments says, mistakes from the Latvian side. I don't like it as a fan. And that becomes the issue, right? Is when you play a team like Sweden, you have to make sure you're clean. It's our standard quote on this channel. You have to play better than your best, and your star talent has to be better than what it can be, because you go up against a full NHL squad with the Swedes. Yes, you can look at their coaching and say, well, they haven't started very hot, but they still have the talent. When is the game starting? The game is already underway. It was 12:58 into the first period, a 0-0 hockey game between Sweden and Latvia. The earlier games today between the Czechs and the Danes is over. 3-2 your final in that one. as well. We've seen two other games today. The Swiss beat Italy 3-0, and Germany took down Germany beat France 5-1. Switzerland ended up beating Italy 3-0 the final in that one. As the Latvians start to pressure in the offensive zone, see if they're going to be able to push through on this one. Shot from the outside. And that's one of the things you start to see is teams like Latvia, they're going to hold around, and they might not take every chance they get the opportunity for, but they're looking for one or two very quality high-end chances, or if it's a rebound, that could be the difference in these games. A shot saved by from the point nearly went, could have been an interesting shot there with a lot of traffic out in front. Those kind of shots you're looking for rebounds, especially when you're playing the Latvians, where they're going to clog up that middle. It's a tough game, and for the Swedes, they just play their style and hope that, frankly, it's going to be good enough with enough offensive pressure. And we saw that against the U.S. a little bit too, where the U.S. just kept going north. And at some point, if you keep going north, you're going to expand the game as Raymond comes down now. Shot saved by Merzlikins on Forsling, one-timer attempt. You look for the Swedes to continue on that north trend. If they can continue going north, it's a very tough game for teams like the Swedes or teams like Latvia, teams like the weaker ones, like the Danes or the Italians for that matter too, because it's very difficult as a defensive team to turn the tide in those ones because you keep going north. Eventually, you have to try and get them to go south, and you either trade chances, which you're probably not going to win those battles, or you just end up turtling in your own end, and then you don't kind of come back the other way. As Elvis seems on level, he certainly does tonight. He's off to a good start so far. They're going to need him tonight, right? And you look to any kind of upset type games, you need your star talent to be your stars. Dahlin walks in, jams it out in front, saved by Merzlikins off the Forsberg jam play there. Pettersson from the point blocked out front. And that's what teams like Latvia do so well is they find their best goaltending in the games that matter the most. And you can think back to the Krastenbergs one where Gudlevskis rather, who arguably played one of the best games he could have against the Canadians and nearly pulled off the upset in that one. And those are the kind of games that you need from your best goal. Your goaltending tends to be your best players on these kind of teams too. The Danes are very similar. And even the Italians for that matter, they've shown well at this tournament because they've had good goaltending at the right time, and that can be a very open ice for Swedes or a dead zone. Yeah, that's kind of how the Latvian style works. Is if you're throwing kind of those long stretch passes, the Latvians are going to knock it down and push you back the other way, and that's how you can tell that it's going to be a good game for the Latvians if they can establish that early. It just makes it that much more difficult for teams like the Swedes to get established in the offensive end. Turnovers at your own blue line are always a good sign as well. And so we'll see for the Latvians if they're going to be able to pull off kind of that opening goal. Because if they can find the first one, it tends to be a lot easier for them to kind of get that defensive game established after that, especially against a team like the Swedes where they're going to be a little bit more on that offensive panicky side where they haven't had a great start to the tournament. And so if you go into the quarterfinals and a must-win, Carlson from the point shot blocked, Hedman now, once again, trying to put their way through here as Lindholm now cycles it back to the point to Carlson. Saved by Merzlikins again, and Elvis needs some type of Vezina trophy game. He's probably going to need a better one than that, and you once again, right? Like I'm not saying that Latvia doesn't have a shot in this game because, frankly, I'd say they probably have out of the lower end teams, whether it's the Czechs, whether it's the Swiss, well, the Swiss maybe not, but the Czechs, the Latvians, the Danes, Italy, and France, I'd say Latvia probably has the best shot to upset a team like the Swedes, just because the Czechs would try and go offensive and offense on offense, mono on mono, which just wouldn't work. And the Finns, we saw how they worked. We saw how they played. They were able to shut down the Swedish offense. And then the Swedes started going that panic mode, forcing stuff. And the Finns don't necessarily conform to that because they're just waiting for you to make mistakes. And that's what teams like Latvia do so well. And that's kind of the trick, right? And it's going to be an interesting one for either side, whichever team ends up playing here, is can you shut down the best offensive teams at the tournament? It's the same story with Canada and the US. It's the same story with any of your best rivalries. Finland's and the Swedes, offense on defense. Canada, the US, offense on defense. And I know Canada has definitely grown their offensive side at this tournament in particular. But you get into those key type games, it's can the Canadian defensive side shut down the Americans' offense approach? And typically, and what we've seen in years past, is that they have been able to do that. World Championship's a little bit different. We desperately need Leo Carlsson. Yeah, that Leo Carlsson would have been a huge help to this Swedish team if he was here. And you look to the difference kind of between Four Nations and this one, and a few key injuries was really a huge separator. And I wouldn't say that Carlson's obviously one that you would have liked back, but it is a different team. And it's been interesting to see because we've spoken very highly on the Swedes on this channel as far as coming into this tournament and kind of through it as well, just because they have the pieces in place. They just haven't gotten to the level that they were at Four Nations where, they beat the US. They almost beat, they came to overtime with the Finns. They came to overtime with Canada. And so they get one bounce in either of those two games. Oh, and deflected in front, and Kempe gets the opening goal off what looked like a kick shot out in front, but looked to be more of that deflection type kick, as Sweden will get the opening goal in this one. They will lead a 1-0 score early on in the first 11 minutes of the game. It's going to be a tough sled back now for this Latvian squad, but once again, Swedes do lead early here, and we'll see whether or not. And it's as Sweden leads 1-0, and Now, here becomes the important part. If you're a team like Latvia here, you need to shut the door in the next 5 minutes of this game, because teams like the Swedes, we talk about the snowball effect a little bit on here as well, but for a team like Sweden, if they can get it going offensively, especially against a team like Latvia, this game becomes a snowball. And if the snowball keeps rolling down the hill, it never stops. But if the snowball hits a tree or hits something and it breaks, it stops rolling down that hill. And so for Latvia, if they need to kind of stop that momentum right now, especially early here, if they want any shot at coming back in this game. Oh, and Gabriel Landeskog gets the second of the game. And once again, we talked about the snowball effect. Sweden now leads 2-0 in the span with 2 goals in the span of a minute. And it's going to be a bit of a tough one for Latvia now to come back. Yep, and just like that, the entire mood changes in the crowd. The Swedes are up on their feet, and Latvia is less than on their feet. Weird shot from the point, kicked down by Lucas Raymond, who passed it over to Gabriel Landeskog, who deposits it in the open net. That was a beautiful play. A shin pad to the stick into the back of the empty net. And Sweden does now lead a 2-0 score in this one. 8:24 left to go in the first period. And this game could become an ugly one, and fast. Now I'm curious to see everyone who had Latvia early on here. Are we still thinking Latvia is going to pull through as Victor Hedman now enters the zone? Cycles it down. Rickard Rakell with the puck down low. Gets it out to Elias Pettersson, who shoots it across crease, looking for Erik Karlsson on the back door. Could not find it. Dahlin takes it behind his net. Jams passes it, and as much as teams like Latvia cause problems, the Swedes also play a very structured game, and they find ways to cause those problems. Didn't Latvia win bronze in IIHF of Worlds a few years back? Forgot what year. Yes, they did. They pulled off the bronze medal win back on home soil, too, I might add, which was a crazy tournament when you think about it, kind of looking back, and one that I'd say surprised quite a few people, including myself. But that Latvian team that year was a lot of the same of what we've kind of seen so far at this tournament with good goaltending, and that's really what they have: good goaltending, good defensive capability, and an ability to play both sides of the puck. And teams like Latvia, that's how they thrive. And by the way, where do you watch it? TSN or something like Olympics package off TV? I watch it on CBC Gem, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company or Corporation or something. And so they're like the national provider, and so they have a streaming service for the Olympics. So that's where I watch most of these games on. We always have two scores in our head, what we want and what we think. That is very fair, and I can appreciate that. I hope Canada wins their game against the Czechs by 7 goals tomorrow, but realistically, they might lose, which wouldn't be pretty. And then you also look, and there's the women's side of this tournament too, which that one's been a bit of a disappointment for Canadians as well. With you look at their game against the U.S., a 5-0 loss in that one, and that was a tough start to the tournament for that one as well. Germany won silver in 23. Yes, that's also true. And that one was another one where it was a bit of a surprise of a tournament. And those are the kind of teams that you look to, and you never really know what to expect, especially at the World Championships, where the tournament early on is a little bit more predictable, but you get to the playoff rounds, a 1-game, 1-out type of tournament shows that anyone can win at any point. And then from there, it's only really a matter of time before you have those big upsets at these tournaments. And so 4 teams, that's the trick. That's the beauty of it. We have a tendency of losing leads. Yeah, you know what? That is very fair, especially for the Swedes, who I don't know if today's the day that they'll choke out. And we coming into the tournament in our prediction video, we had the Swedes finishing in 4th place. And my personal thought process behind that was, yes, the Swedes are a better team than the Finns, but the Finns in those important games, it's kind of like Canada and the U.S., where the Canadians are always kind of underdogs at these tournaments. This year, I'd say a little bit less, but when those games get important, then you see that shift in mentality, and then it becomes a completely different animal. And so you always like to see those rivalries flourish, but unfortunately for the Finns and the Swedes, the Finns have always kind of been that team that comes out on the top side of these tournaments. And so it's a tough one for sure to be on the losing side of that. I can't say I terribly relate to it, but this year in particular, I feel it might become that sort of issue. An NHL Europe with promotion and relegation might help some of the small nations, but without governing it. And that's actually a really interesting idea. And I've thought about that and kind of the ideas behind that, where you can put the team out in Europe and have a league over there. And then you have your European side of the NHL and you have your North American side of the NHL. Each country kind of gets a team. And then from there, it's European teams play each other, North American teams play each other. And they're the Maple Leafs of international tournaments. High expectations, but always choking. Yeah, that's fair for the Swedes. But anyway, back to the NHL point. Like, you could theoretically do that where you have 2 leagues happening simultaneously. Yes, you need another 20-team expansion, which would be tough. And I'm not going to say that it's easy to find 20 teams and the money to fund 20 teams, and even more so the players to fund 20 teams. But you think about how much growth for the game that would be, where you have the best players from all over competing, and then you have players who will likely be signing with contracts at home. Whether it diminishes the North American talent pool, that might become the other question, but it also would give a lot more players opportunities to play at the highest level, and that might be worth it for the NHL league. I think relegation for NHL would be great, but big money would not allow it. Yeah, and that's also fair. And part of the problem with the way that Raymond walks in, tries to backdoor it over to Zibanejad, could not find it though. The money and the contracts, the way that the contracts work, especially in the NHL, kind of limits the ability to do that. And I wouldn't say that North American teams are that accustomed to that relegation factor that obviously European squads tend to have a lot more. So it becomes a question mark, right? And I'm not sure which way it ends up going, but it's kind of the beauty of it. And I've always enjoyed the relegation parts, Oh, and shot off the draw by Nylander, saved by Merzlikins. And that becomes the question, right? Is would the fans be okay with seeing it on the biggest stage? And frankly, I don't think they would, because they're not accustomed to it. They don't really know what it is. And we see that at these double IHF tournaments as well, where there is the relegation factor. Most North American fans wouldn't really understand what that would mean as far as to actually have it happen to them, because that's not typically a question mark in any of these tournaments. I'd say the closest Canada came was when they did get upset by Latvia back a few years at the World Juniors, where, not last year, but the year before that in 25, that tournament nearly had Canada relegated. If they were to lose one more game, if they lost to the Germans, that entire tournament would have led Canada to be relegated, because they ended up losing to the U.S. Yes, they opened up with the win against the Finns, but they lose to the Germans, tiebreakers and such. All of a sudden would have had that tournament in a very different spot, and would have been very entertaining to see Canada taking on Kazakhstan in a relegation game on home ice. And honestly, who knows if they would have been able to pull that one off, because the way they played at that tournament was absolutely abysmal. And I also know that's where we got a lot of our Latvian friends who are now watching this. And so if you were a part of that run, I hope I can hear from you guys on that perspective. As Raquel now walks in, tries to pull it forward, could not get it done. So we are 3 minutes and 15 seconds now from the end of the first period. Reminder, we'll be talking through the rest of the playoff picture at the break, giving some of our predictions on those games. We have a talented team. We still need an aging core. We still have an aging core. We need some fresh young guys to take over. Our juniors did so well. The future looks bright, at least. Yeah, that's very fair. And yeah, it's kind of a mix, right? As it does appear that Forsling will head to the box for delay of game now. 3 minutes and 6 seconds left. Latvia will head to the power play. Oh yeah, that was a guilty as charged too. But Latvia will head to a power play with just over 2.5 or three and a bit minutes left. And so we'll see promotion relegation is maybe a major feature of European sports like soccer, football for us, and rugby. Yeah, and I actually think that's a very important part. And in North American, you have, when I say by Markstrom power play, you do have a little bit of that with the NHL draft, and you purposely try and lose. And I think that kind of defeats the point of it, where for the NHL, for the draft in particular, you don't really want to encourage losing. And the PWHL has an interesting concept where it's kind of the reverse, where once you lose or once you're eliminated from the playoffs, then you try and win, because if you win, you get points to your draft seed, which discourages kind of that tanking mentality. But at the same time, in the NHL, it's very difficult to implement that, especially having done what they've been doing for so long. It becomes extremely difficult to try and reverse that process. Oh, and a save, or I don't know if it's a save, I think they just missed the net there. 2:30 to go in the first period, 1:20 left on the Latvian power play. Some decent chances so far. Now it's just a matter of time if they can capitalize late in the period. We talk a lot about that momentum stopper. If Latvia can go into this first intermission in the lead or within a goal, I think that's a huge deal for them. Krastenberg's down up to the top, shoots. Oh, and deflected just wide of the net. Lachmelis in the area on that one. Stops up on the dime. Passes into the zone, and Latvia will re-enter the zone here. Jams it in deep. Picks it up, carries around the side. And now it's cleared out once again. 30 seconds to go on the Latvian power play. Less than 2 minutes to go in our first period. And it's been a bit of a tough start for the Latvians so far. We'll see whether or not they are going to be able to kind of get themselves on the board here, especially early. It doesn't appear so. This power play is coming to a close with just under a minute left to play in the first period. 1:10 to go. And the Swedes break out offensively. So the Latvian power play does now expire, and the Latvians shut it down. Going back now the other way. And another icing call. We haven't had one of those in a while. Shots are 9-6 Sweden for Sweden, 6 shots for the Latvians. And it has been a bit of a game for both these teams so far. The Swedes had that quick 2 goals in the span of a minute. And then from there, they've kind of struggled to get much going offensively. And it's the joy of playing teams like Latvia is they're going to sit on leads, and once they get up, they're going to hold it. But for a team like the Swedes, you have to look at, they haven't had a great tournament so far. Oh, and Schmitz now takes a penalty for interference and will head to the box. Sweden will go to their first power play of the game. 51.9 seconds to go. That could be a very costly penalty for the Latvians here. Heading in pretty close to the break. Oh, that's a weak call. That's a very weak call. Wow. Sweden will still head to the power play here. A pretty good power play unit you have. Eriksson, Nylander, Kempe, Dahlin, and I say Eriksson already? Raymond, maybe? I think I haven't said Raymond. Nylander walks in, shoots, tips just wide of the net there. So the Swedes get ever so much closer to finding the back of the net. And what's slowly but surely shaping out to be Sweden and the USA in that quarterfinal round, that would be an electric game. You have 2 teams, both gold medal favorites coming in. Nylander walks in, shoots just wide. Kempe not being able to get to the rebound as they clear it out. 10 seconds to go left in the first period. I would agree. I would have to agree. Nylander looks up at the clock with 3 seconds to go. Eriksson flips to the front. Shoots. Saved by Merzlikins. And that will do it for our first period. Score after 1 period of play is 1-0 for the Swedes, or 2-0 for the Swedes. And yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting game so far. And outside of those 2 goals, one was a bit of a lucky bounce. The other one, shin pad to shin pad, then into the back of the net. So you could really say 2 lucky bounces for the Swedes. It has been a relatively even game so far. Do you think Schmitz actually has a chance to go number 1 in the draft, or is that too much local hype? What I'd say is it ultimately was going to come down to how well he played at this tournament. And I wouldn't say he has lost any draft stock so far. He's played well. He's shown that he can compete with NHLers. I think if Latvia ended up going one more game into this tournament and you get to see both Sweden, his game against the Swedes, and his game against the US, 2 teams full of NHL players, they could have very well seen that gap end up Sweden, one of the gold medal favorites. Coming into this tournament, absolutely. What we've seen so far, maybe a bit of a different story. But back to the Schmitz point, I mean, he has the chance to go number 1. It's a little bit less now, I'd say, than what it could have been. And obviously, when we made our preview video for the Latvian team, we highlighted Schmitz as a player. There was the whole Gavin McKenna situation going on in the middle of that. And so that had a little bit to do with that storyline coming into the tournament. But he still could very well end up number 1, and it ultimately will come down to how well he plays over the next few weeks, and especially at this tournament. It's a little bit more tough for a defenseman to show himself at the highest level, and this penalty today won't help him with that. But for a guy that needs to kind of find his way, that isn't the worst option. You have an Olympic tournament competing against the best on best. That's a pretty good showcase type tournament. And he's held his own, and he's played well enough. And if he can continue that, then it looks a lot better on him. And I do think that number 1 now is a bit of a stretch, but he very well could turn some heads and end up in the top 5, the top 3, because obviously Ivar Stenberg's the other one who's over in that conversation, whether you're looking at the top 2, Verhoff's the other one who could very well sneak into that top spot depending on what the team is looking for, whether they need a defenseman or a forward. But typically, when you have that number 1 overall pick, you pick the best player available. And so I do think that McKenna is that guy. I think Stenberg is good, but what we saw at the juniors, at least in my view, wasn't necessarily what I was hoping to see from him at that tournament. Yes, he played well, and yes, he had a good tournament, but I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination that he was the guy that earned his spot at that tournament. McKenna played good. Stenberg played good, but just not to that standalone level that's, hey, this guy should go number one. I would put a bet that he will be the highest drafted player from Latvia anyway. That is probably true. I'm trying to think of who would be the highest player drafted. Loch Malice? No, he was later round, I think. Someone with Google can find that one for me. But we will now go over, and I know that Richards Lampa had asked for it a little bit earlier, but with the score predictions. And for the scores, obviously all the teams at this tournament are reseeded coming into this one, or at least into the semifinals. They get the automatic seeds from the qualifying to the quarters. And so quarterfinal matchups are set up already. And you look to these quarterfinal matchups. Canada and the Czechs, I think is going to be a lot tighter of a game than most people will give it credit for. Yes, the Canadians blew them out in the prelims, but realistically, between that game and this game, a lot of different things have happened. The Canadians, yes, they played a few games in between there, had some very blowout type games as well, but I think the Czechs are going to roll into that one understanding what they're going to need to do. I think this game's going to be a lot tighter. I think this one will end up probably 6-5 or 4-2 as the final. I think the Czechs are going to be a bit of a surprise team to the Canadians in that one. It is a relatively even mix there. I don't know whether or not the Canadians are going to be able to pull off, or the Czechs are going to be able to pull off that huge upset, but it will be a relatively tight game as well. Finland and the Swiss, this game, I'd say it's going to be a coin toss type game. I think realistically, this game could very well end in overtime, kind of that 3-2, 2-1 margin between Finland and the Swiss. I could also see the Finns finding their game, shutting the Swiss down offensively and going back the other way, finding that 4-1, 3-0 margin. On the fly, I said my name. I try my best. I hope I said it right. I didn't know that. Gergensen at 14th is the highest. So very likely Schmitz will be above that. I would be shocked if he falls anything past 10, especially after what we've seen so far from at this tournament. But once again, joy of the NHL is they draft who they think they should. Anyway, so back to the predictions, because I know I get off to a bit on some tangents here. Between Finland and the Swiss, probably that tighter game. Overtime wouldn't surprise me. 3-2 would kind of be that final end prediction, especially after what we saw today with the Swiss. They played a really good game. They had a lot of forward pressure, and it's ultimately going to come down to goaltending, because Giannoni coming off of a back-to-back, we'll see whether or not he's going to be able to kind of lead that charge for the Swiss. Something to keep an eye on there. The Finns probably should win this one, but it could flip either way, especially if the Swiss get a hot goaltender. Over to the Slovaks and the Germans, and that game, I would say, that game is about as coin flip as you're going to get. And in our prediction, where we put out our post on our social channels, I think I ended up having the Germans winning that one in overtime, and it was 3-2 or 2-1 or something along those lines, or maybe 4-3. I would say that I still hold that prediction, especially after today. I wouldn't say that really changed my mind. The Germans played well. I wouldn't say they played great, but they played good enough. And then the question becomes is how tired are you on a back-to-back? And it could become a very important distinction there, where for a team like the Germans, back-to-backs can be tricky. You go up against a rested team in the Slovaks. Is there going to be a little bit of idle time there? Could they potentially struggle with the extra days off? Maybe, right? Like, there is a potential for that. But realistically, I think that both these teams are going to come out relatively fresh. It wasn't a very intensive game against the French today. They played well. They dominated from start to finish. And so they go into a game against the Slovaks where they have quite a bit of momentum behind them already. And now it's just a matter of if they can keep it going. Should be very interesting to see, just to really see. whether or not they are able to kind of pull off that win. This game is by far the closest game that we're going to see. The Finns and the Swiss, I think, will be close. It'll be a really good game, but in the end, your closest game will be between Germany and Slovakia, because those two teams are very similar on paper. And you look at their offensive side, they have kind of that star talent with Leon Draisaitl, Tim Stützle. On the German side, on the Slovakian side, you have Slavkovsky and Dvorsky. Kind of those two guys have led the charge for both those teams. And then on the defensive side, you have players that kind of take the headlines as well. And whether or not that's going to have any impact on this game, you need your star players to be your best. And if they can find that, there is a pretty good potential for them to end up taking this game. But at the same time, it could go either way. And then the last one here, and once again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but if you look at the U.S. compared to the Swedes, they are razor thin as well. And once again, yes, Latvia could very well pull off the upset today and make a huge comeback and end this game for one in the history books, right? Where Latvia comes back, beats the Swedes after being down 2 goals. That would be a storyline in and of itself. But we're taking a look at kind of the most probable. You're probably going to see the U.S. taking on the Swedes. It'll be a very tight game. It'll be a very tight game as well. And so for the U.S., right, it's going to be that kind of slugfest type game. You have an offensive team against an offensive team. It's kind of your first tune-up really between Canada and the U.S. as well, where the U.S. hasn't necessarily played any of that top-end talent yet at this tournament. Yes, the Germans are good. Yes, Latvia is good. Yes, the Danes are good, but not necessarily in terms of offensive firepower. And we saw this matchup at Four Nations. The Swedes came out on top. That game is going to be probably one of the tightest we'll see, and it really could be either way. In that one, I do think that the U.S. comes out on top. I think we're going to see more of that offensive style, but also could end up defensively, especially if these two teams decide to go with that route, because they can play both, right? They're two teams. They have offensive ability. The Swedes are a little bit more built defensively now with some key injuries to top end star talent, but they have the ability to go both ways. And the U.S. is offense, and we saw them struggle against the Danes because, one, they didn't have some great goaltending in that game, but they also kind of struggled to get anything going offensively. And yes, they ended up scoring 6 goals. I'm not privy to that fact, but their defensive side takes a hit when they go into that slugfest type mode. And I think that's where the Swedes could become that sort of Danish type squad where they shut down the U.S. offense. All of a sudden, they can very well pull off the upset there. The Swedes, the U.S., two of the best teams we're going to see. The edge does go to the U.S. just with how they've played so far at this tournament. I even look at the game against Germany, it had been 2 days ago now, and that game, I think, kind of solidified the U.S. as the favorites in this one. But once again, it very well could go either way. They're two very good teams, and we'll see whether or not the U.S. is going to be able to kind of live up to their expectations at this tournament and find their way to the eventual gold medal, right? Because that's the goal for the U.S. is this year in many ways has been gold or bust since the start. They lost to the Canadians back at Four Nations, and since then they've had their sights set on gold for this tournament. Canada's very much the same. I'd say the Swedes originally were a bit of the same as well, but I think they would have been okay with getting the second or third spot. The U.S., I'd say, is gold or bust. Canada's definitely gold or bust at this tournament, but it also now becomes because of the fact that the Swedes ended third in the group because they didn't play all that well early on in this tournament. They've put themselves in a situation that they're going to frankly struggle in. And it'll be interesting whether or not this Swedish team is going to be able to live up to the occasion and pull off the upset against the Americans. But then you look ahead, right? The Swedes are now a lower seed because of that. Assuming if the Slovaks beat Germany, if the Finns beat the Swiss, if Canada goes on to beat the Czechs, that would mean that the lowest seed plays the highest seed. Sweden would take on Canada in the semifinals. So the Swedes kind of shot themselves a bit in the foot there where, you know, they keep that last goal in hand. You don't get that slashing penalty late in the game. All of a sudden, this entire this entire conversation is completely different, right? Where teams like Latvia, it's a tough game there. Teams like the US, even tougher. Canada, even tougher. And then if the rest of the tournament plays out as expected, you're going to have to go through the Finns in the final as well. And so you think about that path, Latvia to start, the US in second, the US next up, then Canada, then the Finns, just to go and win a gold medal. That path is so unlikely to happen that they're going to need a miracle at this point. But at the same time, it's the beautiful part about these tournaments is truly anything can happen. And teams like the Czechs can pull off upsets against Canada. Teams like Latvia can beat Canada in the World Juniors prelims. Anything can happen in these tournaments for either side. And so a huge deal for them. And it is still a possibility, but they come top of the group. You think about how much easier their path in would have been. Probably would have played the Germans. Assuming they beat the Germans, then they go on to play whoever it might be, whether it be the US, whether it be Canada. I don't think they'd care as much coming into this one, but it's a tough one, right? And I know we'll have a fair number of Swedes in our chat, so that's why I'm trying to tailor it to this matchup in particular. But for the Swedes, that one goal probably ends up costing them the tournament and any chance at even playing for a medal. Not saying that they were guaranteed locks to go, but I would take the Swedes a lot more confidently if this was a semifinal versus a quarterfinal, where we know their history at these kind of tournaments. Expectation runs onwards. And the fact that, yes, the World Junior team kind of broke the trend there, the Swedes still are a team that are notorious chokers. They bring that with them everywhere they go, and unfortunately for them, that could be a huge difference in this kind of game. And I don't know whether or not they end up making it that far, but still should be very interesting to see. Obviously, two teams in this tournament. Let's go Latvia. Going to be interesting to see coming out of this game, to see which team comes out on top. Sweden, Latvia, still a tight game to the end. And yes, the Swedes get out to the early lead, but it very well could go either way to the very end, because Latvia is a team that are feisty. They don't let up just because they're down. And so we'll see if that has any implication on what's to come. But it should be very interesting to see and really see how this game plays out, because some huge implications. Yes, you don't want to go up against the US in the next round, but unfortunately you have to. And then from there, the tournament gets a little bit more exciting, where yes, the Swiss have the potential to pull off the upset against Finland. Germany has the potential to beat Slovaks, and the Czechs are never an easy out at these tournaments, at any of the tournaments really, that we've seen at least so far. But I feel like it's been a while since I have taken a peek at this chat. So if you do have any questions you want to see answered, whether it be about this game, whether it be about the tournament overall, whether it be predictions as well, please do let me know down in the chat below. I always want to hear from you. That's part of the joy of these live streams. This is our very first one of the 2026 season. I don't actually believe we did one last year. We wouldn't have done one last year as well. So this will be our first live stream in about 2 years now. No one chokes like the English football team at Men's Soccer World Cup and Euros. That is very fair. And I'm very excited about the World Cup too, which is coming to North America for the first time in, I think, maybe ever, or maybe a few years. I can't remember. But for this, the Canadian team in that, they're going to be the underdogs. They're going to have a really tough group as well. And so if they can pull off an upset, great. If they can find their way through, even better. But it will be a bit of a tough road for them. And I think, once again, it's only a matter of time until they kind of find their way through on that one. But it's so over. It's so over. There's still hope. Come on, have some faith. But we will switch it back to our face, I guess. There we go. Hey everybody, how are you guys doing? And yeah, I mean, you look at this tournament so far, I think you look at all the upsets that it's been, and it kicked off on what better of a note than the Slovaks upsetting the Finns. we committed a war crime against Denmark in the first period, and now our tournament is over. You know what? That is sadly true. And the other thing I will remind everybody is the fact that if the way it worked out and the way the tiebreakers ended up situating themselves, if Latvia doesn't pull their goaltender, this entire situation is extremely different. And also the other fun kind of, if we're running down that rabbit hole, the Danes likely would have pulled their goaltender because whether they won by 8 goals or 2 goals had a huge difference. And if Latvia doesn't pull their goaltender, the Danes need to pull theirs to try and get an extra goal. And so it's a classic game of chicken where we could have seen both goaltenders get pulled. Unfortunately for the Latvian squad, they didn't. But we are now back underway here as puck has dropped in the second period. The Swedes are still on the power play, but they did just ice the puck, which is not a great start to the period, if I do say so myself. But second period action is now underway, and letting in that third goal against the Slovaks, coupled with the stupid decision of pulling the goalie against Finland, could have cost us this tournament. Yeah, it's true. And coming to this tournament, we talked an awful lot about the goal differential and how important it was, I guess is the word I'm looking for, because you think about it, right? And this tournament, I think, has been a really good example of that fact where the Swedes lost out by 1 goal. That's the reason why they ended up third in the group. That's the reason why they're going to have to end up playing the U.S. The Latvians are in this situation, have to go through the Swedes and then the U.S. because of 1 goal as well. And the 1 goal has shown itself to be incredibly important at this tournament. I mean, the Finns blew the living daylights out of the Italians, and that game was ugly in and of itself. But Czechia, Canada, we already cooked if you play like in the group. Yeah, that's fair on the Czech-Canada point. And the power play is now over for the Swedes. We are back to even strength, and yeah, I mean that is very fair. Where you look at it for the Latvians, like the fact that they lose to the Danes they played really well, right? And the fact that the Danes go up 3 goals in that first period, it's very difficult to come back from that. And especially as a team like Latvia, who's well known for their defensive side, not really an offensive team, going against the way that at least how well that that a team like Denmark is going to play defensively. It's always a tough slide. They have good goaltending, and that shot way wide. Cycles around to Belinskas. Jam play. Oh, jam play, but saved as we now have some rough stuff in front of the net. I don't know if they're going to call any penalties off that. I hope Canada gets gold because the U.S. are so unlikable. Well, I hope so too. I would very much enjoy Canada winning the gold medal this year. I think we've earned our pay on that one. You think about how good this Canadian team is though this year. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't take the U.S. as the number 1 seed because they had a very good team on paper, especially coupled with the fact that you look at how well that the U.S. played at 4 Nations, and outside of that one last game, they were a very dominant team at that tournament. I wonder how the Kings will cope with losing Fiala in the foreseeable future. It will be a tough loss, and especially you kind of add in the fact that they just got Panarin too, and they didn't spend that much on him, but with how much that Kings team would have needed him, it's a lot tougher of a sled now. Free agent or the trade deadline's coming up. That could be another spot where we see a lot of them we see the Kings make a real big acquisition, especially with their team right now. It's a good team, but it's not really that championship winning team without Fiala. As well with him out of the tournament. Oh, nearly the Latvians had a good chance there. They've been putting a lot of pressure on the Swedes early into this period here. I doubt Latvia will win. Sweden's pushing, winning already by 2 points. But yes, there is still time. There is still time to pull this, to kind of turn the tide in this game. they do need a goal. And what we've seen from the Swedes so far at this tournament is they're typically pretty good at giving teams at least one goal, kind of that gift type goal. And if you're a team like Latvia, you just have to wait around long enough, keep playing your system and trying to pull off that upset. Should be an interesting one for sure. Fiala's injury, yeah, it did not look good. And you also couple that with the fact he was stretchered off and rushed to the hospital. Like, you never want to see that, especially at these tournaments. And, like, in one of those kind of meaningless games too, right, where the game is already so far out of shot from the point, blocked up high. Latvian shot there, blocked by the Swedish forward. You think about how meaningless that game is in the grand scheme of things. Whether or not you lose by a goal or 2 goals had really no impact over for the Swiss at the end of this tournament. And so you would have liked to have seen kind of you rest your best players in those situations, but there's so much time left in that game that you just kind of had to play that out. And unfortunately, you lost probably your best player. That could be the difference why you end up losing. Okay, guys, I'll go to sleep now. Thanks for watching, as always, and I hope to see you back. We might do another one of these. I'm not sure on the teams yet. I think it'll depend more so on interest. The Sweden-Latvia contingent ended up winning our poll, so that was where we ended up. But if you are... I saw Fiala being laid in a weird position because he was in huge pain. Yeah, and it's very rare that you see someone stretched out on their front. That was the other part, right? Because he didn't want to move because it hurts so much. So it's always it's an ugly thing to see, but still, like, you never want to see that, especially not at the Olympics where it's like you come and the fact that we haven't seen NHL players in 12 years, this doesn't help its case. And we saw it at Four Nations too, right? Where where Charlie McAvoy for the U.S. went down. And for those who don't know, I do some stuff with a company called Black and Gold Productions out of Boston and the Bruins channel. And when McAvoy went down, that team's season got completely derailed. And it wasn't great to start, but as soon as you lose McAvoy, the expectation goes from, well, it could be a competitive team to it's a rebuild team now. And yes, they're doing a lot better this year. They have a lot of guys who have come back from injury. But the very fact that it was winning medals. With McAvoy, like, that can derail a team's season. And so that's part of the reason why, Forsberg wants to get a little bit extra with Lachimelis. 15-14 left to go in the second period. It can completely derail a team's season, right? And that's why NHL players haven't been for the last many years. And that argument will always come up. And I've seen it a lot more, especially on the women's side this year, where some of the more PWH, like the PWHL fans, are all saying, well, we need them for our team, or the players for our run. And so it's interesting to see every so often kind of those storylines get brought back up. And it was one of the big reasons why they didn't play in 18 or 22. But I do think that you need this. And we saw it at Four Nations just how much you need it. The fights, I'd say, were probably one of the best and most important things that happened. And it showed that best on best needs to come back. And there was even a fight at this Olympics, which I don't think I could say was on my bingo card for this tournament. It was exciting to see as a hockey fan, but crazy to think like just how far that the best on best have been and how long it's been. I'm not falling behind. There's a common saying in European hockey, beating Canada is worth more than winning medals. That is, like, it's funny you say that, but I've always, like, it's the same, right? With kind of the other side is, for Canada, we always expect to win medals. And that's been it's gold or bust just about every time Canada will take the ice at these tournaments. But there's also years where it's, okay, well, we don't really care about winning the medal. We want to beat this team, right? And I think Four Nations was less about winning the championship and more about, hey, we want to beat the U.S. and kind of make our point for the Olympic tournament. And that was probably one of the biggest differences, I'd say, as Schmitz now Oh no, did he get called delay a game there? No, I don't think so. The like you need to keep playing your game, and yes, the results come with it. But for other countries like Latvia who beat Canada, like it's always amazes me just the celebration you see. And the Czechs are my favorite one because every year they beat Canada at the World Juniors, which I mean that's been a storyline in and of itself where they continue to do it. I just think like that's a really impressive thing, and it's really cool to see the celebration each and every time because they do it so much, you think that it just becomes common practice, but every time it's a huge celebration. And so I've always enjoyed that part, especially watching as a Canadian fan where I don't necessarily have a dog in the ring, although I always would like to see Canada win. But as the tournament goes on, where you don't really see that with the other teams, like beating the Americans, although it doesn't happen that much, you don't quite see that same kind of celebration, if you will. Okay. There we go. Unless you're beating Finland, who makes beating Sweden's the top priority, and that's the beauty of it, right? And it's that whole rival mentality. And Canada, it's always been the U.S., right? And I mean, you can throw the Russians in there too, I guess. But there's different teams with different rivalries. Like, I'm pretty sure Norway and Denmark have one too, a little bit. But Sweden and Finland, a huge one. Canada and the U.S., a huge one as well. And the Czechs and Canada have been growing into one over the last few years. And I don't know whether they are there yet on the big stage, but they're definitely getting closer. And these tournaments, best on best, are a huge stepping stone towards that. Oh, the Latvians had a 2-on-1 there. Just got out the way of Tralmax there. 13:21 to go in the second period here. 2-0 score for the Swedes as they lead in this one. The Latvians have had a bit of a better second period so far. They wouldn't say it was great, but it has been a lot better. The Four Nations tournament gave those Four Nations an advantage for the Olympics as they already played 5 games with basically the Olympic roster. And that's exactly right. But what I would also add there is the fact that the U.S. a little bit different because the U.S. has rolled with a lot of their same lines. Canada's kind of thrown it all into a blender as far as their lines from Four Nations go. Like you think about how mixed up those lines are. Crosby, McKinnon, and then Reinhart, Point, and Marner were kind of the line. And then you had Stone with McDavid and Marner and Point and whoever else filled out that bunch. And Reinhart were kind of the... Oh, and Forsberg taps it home, putting the Swedes up 3-0, 12:24 left to go in the second period. That's a real tough one to give up if you're the Latvians. You're gonna want that one back for sure. What happened there? Carlson, I get distracted. Carlson backdoor to Philip Forsberg, the player who was benched off the opener, comes back and rewards his coach with a goal. The Swedes do now lead 3-2, and this is going to be a tough sled for the Latvians to come back. It was definitely a tough one. The Four Nations, yeah, we touched that one. The coolest thing in the world would be for the Czechs to take inspiration from our juniors and beat Canada tomorrow. But unfortunately, the results are brutal, and tomorrow looks grim. Yeah, like... Realistically, the Czechs, I wouldn't say are there quite yet. They have a lot of really good pieces that over the next few years will eventually evolve into it. But I don't know if they're there quite yet to beat Canada, especially with the team that Canada has. Like, it is a very good Canadian team this year. But unfortunately, it's going to just be a tough sled in. Oh, Schmidt's now making his move. Zile. Oh. And Ravinskis misses the net by a mile. We are now on to another commercial break. What do we got? We put flowers at the Canadian Embassy when we won last time. Well, that's very generous of you. Bro, they missed a penalty for sure. GG's 3-0 in 20 seconds before they missed a penalty on Sweden. Yeah, Sweden didn't profit from four nations who will play USA in the quarters. USA and Canada were always faves. Only Finland, I would say, benefited. And I'd actually almost argue the other way because the Swedes did get a lot of kind of that intro where, like Canada, I mean, you look at the Canadians and the Americans. The Canadians less so. They've changed their lines. But for the U.S., they've kept a lot of their same roster. Canada's kept a lot of their same roster. The Swedes have kept a lot of their same roster. And you build up a lot of that chemistry you wouldn't necessarily get. They've started extremely slow at this tournament, which is tough. And I mean, you obviously would want to start better and real quick at these kind of tournaments, but it is not necessarily the be all end all there for the Swedes. Like what are they? Interesting. It'll be a tough road for the Swedes to get through this tournament, but realistically, four nations help them. They have a lot of the same guys coming back, a few injuries to key players, but in the end, that little bit of extra practice never hurt. And you compare that not necessarily to the other big four teams, but also the other squads like Latvia, like the Czechs, like the Swiss, who don't necessarily have that practice. And the teams like those you see a lot at the World Championships, and those World Championship teams stick together. And we've seen that with the Swiss, who have been a constant silver the last 2 years at the silver medalist position, but they've stuck together, and we've seen that early at this tournament, is that they have that kind of chemistry and that built-in chemistry factor that is so hard to build at these tournaments. Czechs don't seem as confident this time, but I hope they won't make Canada sweat for the win. And I hope that they humble some Canadians. And that doesn't sound great considering that I am Canadian, but I do hope that they do put a little bit of a shock, if you will, into the Canadian team, because frankly, we need it. It has been a while since we've seen it, and so I do think that they need some kind of spark. As I am now checking our, because I'm curious, I'm checking our poll votes. We have 251 votes into our poll of who do you think will win. 53% say Latvia, 47% say Sweden. So that is interesting to me. I feel like we have some biased Latvians in our comment section right now. But still, you never know, right? And as much as it is a 3-0 score right now, the Swedes are well known for their inability to hold leads. So we'll see whether or not that's going to continue into this game. Okay, let's go back to here because I fall behind here. Czechs don't seem as confident. Oh, yep, we got that. Maybe Sweden should rest their best players now for tomorrow's game. That always becomes a question at these tournaments. And you look at the goaltending tonight. Yes, probably not starting their best goaltender, but they are definitely starting to play for tomorrow, and we'll see whether or not they're going to start resting their guys. I don't think you do it now, because as much as you rest your best players right now, you're going to end up regretting that later when your best or everyone else is really tired, and so you can only play your top guys. But you'll probably see those minutes start to get reduced, and I don't have the minute by minute in front of me right now, but I would expect that as this game shifts forward, you can expect that kind of pathway to reduce itself in that amount of time that their best players are playing on the ice, because you don't want to overextend your guys at these tournaments, because they're going to be what ends up winning you this tournament. If you make it that far, they're going to be what ends up winning you your matchup against the US, against Canada, because your path in now is basically a death group. Unless, barring any miracles of the Czechs beating Canada, which is very unlikely it happens, or a lower seed than the Swedes pulling off and winning theirs, which is very unlikely because you're basically looking at the Swiss to do that for you, or the Swiss are second seed. So realistically, it's very unlikely that you're going to end up being able to get through. I am interested to see if they can, but in the end, it's very unlikely. As another stretch pass goes for an offside there for the Swedes, but what's your thought on the second period so far? And I would say you look at this Latvian team, and they're trying to do exactly what they need to. Unfortunately for them, they're just down 3 goals. And it's very easy to play that defensive style when you're up or when the game is tight. But as the game gets more exposed, we start to see the Swedes start to walk all over. And that's where we see that higher end goal scoring side really start to come out. And we're seeing that now with the Latvians being a little bit more aggressive in their offensive side. They're going to get picked apart in the next period. I expect the Swedes to kind of walk all over them, but it should be interesting to say the least, because you never really know at these tournaments, right? It very well could go either way, and if you have a really hot goaltender all of a sudden, and Markstrom in the Swedish net decides that he's going to let everything in, could become a very different game very quickly. But realistically, it is starting to look like the Swedes will be the team advancing to the quarterfinal round, where they will take on the US. And I will also mention that I really don't like this tournament format. And I know, like, yes, it's great because every team ends up making it, but it also just kind of encourages that throwing games, and we saw it in 06 last time the tournament was held in Italy. But this year as well, I think we saw that, and I know I talked about it a little bit on the channel in our day recap videos, but it is a bit of a question mark, I think, that they're going to have to address, is how can we fix this going forward. Oh, shot and drop by Markstrom out in front of the net. But it will be cleared around. Typical of us, we mostly have a slow start, then grow in as the tournament goes onward. Same thing happened. We started slow and shaky. Then, yeah, and that's fair. And I think that also ultimately comes down to coaching, which is the other part. And I know a lot of people have been calling for Sam Halam's head, and I know a lot of people as well have been calling for Antti Penninen's head over in Finland. But you look at it for the Swedes, and you don't really care, and that's the beauty of this tournament and the way that's formatted is you don't care how you open. Oh, they score! Traumax for the Latvians. Get them on the board, and we are within 2 goals now. An upset, who knows? All of a sudden, we have ourselves a game. Yep, that is right. 3-1. Fascinating. We back in this, baby. Oh, I'm so excited for the video, the cold open for today's video. If Latvia can somehow pull off the upset and come back in this game, that would be something I don't think I'd ever forget. Latvia needs to score 1 in the second to have a chance, because I personally don't see them scoring 3 in one period. I think I called it by accident. Well, I think you should say that they need to score a second one, because that could be good. Forsling's shot from the point misses way high. Raquel looking for the rebound there. Can't quite find it. 3-1. Oops, Russian. The upset is that we scored at least 1 goal. Well, let's see if they can pull off a second goal and maybe make this game way more interesting than it should be. There's always one gift goal in these games, and I wouldn't consider that one to be that gift goal quite yet. Oh, Pedersen now walks in, drags it out and dumps it into the corner. That's the ups. Yeah, I think we need a second one. I would agree. Yeah. Vilmanis, Lochmelis, Nylander. Yeah, this is kind of what you're expecting, is that neutral zone battle between these two teams, because both teams playing fairly structured neutral zone styles, and the trap stuff as well becomes tough to try and get through, but they've played well so far. Oh, Tried the top left or top side corner there. Didn't quite get it through though. And not icing. Could have been icing though. Not real icing, as the Swedes will break it in and dump it down into the Latvian end to go chase it. 7:19 to go in the second period. And they'll look to, as Swedes are icing it, and it's been a bit of a strange one so far. Yeah, because the Swedes should be spending a lot of time in the Latvian end. Yes, there should be some chances going back the other way, and this period has played a little bit like that, but I've been surprised with how much time the Latvians have spent in the Swedish end here. Schmitz, Orderbalinskis, shot, saved by Markstrom. Ooh, could have been tight. Okay, back to the comments. I think we do need a second one. Yep. We Swedes are generally distrustful of Sam Alam's leadership. Having Gustafsson as the starting goalie and benching Forsberg early were definitely questionable decisions. Yeah, I mean, you look at a few of the decisions made at this tournament, and they're red flags going up early. And yes, I mean, you can make the argument one way or another, but and benching Forsberg early were definitely questionable decisions. Halam's always been kind of a strange, and even at Four Nations, I thought that a few of his moves were weird, and he kind of finds his way as tournaments go onward, but it takes him a little bit to adapt, and I think that's one of the hardest, the worst parts about it is that he realizes it a little bit too late, and we saw that in that opening game against Canada where the Swedes were completely overmatched early on, and then they found something that worked, and they stuck with it, but the fact that it took them kind of that full period, I think, falls on the coaching staff, or 2 periods. It falls on the coaching staff, and you can't always rely on yourself to be able to find your way through it, because especially when you're playing teams like the US, like Canada, if you fall asleep and you don't play well early on, they're going to walk all over you. And so it's tough for the Swedes, and I think part of it does fall on the coaching staff, that you need to be able to get out there early and end up playing your best game. Definitely something hard to kind of keep an eye on. What are your favorite goalie saves from these Olympics? Whew, that's a good question. The one that's really standing out is the Clara Italy save on Pettersson in that 3-2 game, and the one he got injured and ended up coming out of the game on. But that save alone could have ended up making Italy win that game, which is it's crazy to think, but you even consider the fact that that game goes to overtime. You never know what happens in overtime because it's so chance by chance, on a chance by chance basis. You put your hot goaltender in net, and he's played really well at this tournament, and you can see why he's drafted, but it's always interesting to see whether or not they're going to be able to kind of pull their way through. And oh no, I am falling very far behind on these. 3-2 would be nice. I agree. Who is one Latvian player you've noticed this tournament, maybe non-NHL? I mean, I feel like I've talked about him a little bit, but Albert Schmitz for me was a guy who I've had my eye on since the start. I've had my eye on him since the World Juniors, where he really impressed me, and that impressment or whatever that word is, has really impressed me at this tournament again. And I thought that he's been really good. He's played well defensively. So he's shown himself well offensively too, which you kind of need if you're going to become that next NHL type defender. And he's a guy that I think very well could earn his way up into the spot. So for me, Albert Schmitz is one that is very much up there for me. And yeah, I'd say him for sure. Would you bring back tie? I hate ties so much. There's one thing I will never be an advocate for, and that is a tie. And I would rather overtime. I'd rather the weird 2-in-1 system than any kind of tie. Judges of this game for some reason don't look how players are literally being punched as they fall. They get pushed. They get stuck in no punishment. That's fair. Yeah, like I would say that this tournament in particular, they've been doing a lot better of a job at not calling the weak stuff. And they've been a lot less involved, I'd say, than they normally are. And I know European fans are not as accustomed to that, but on the NHL side, it is a lot more like that, where especially come playoff time, not a lot is actually called. And I personally like it better that way. I think it's a lot better, but I can understand how you could really make the argument either way. As Gergensen's now wheels around the net, puts it out front. Can't quite find it though. Okay, back to these putting Wallstedt already. I don't know if that's the move here. It's a 3-1 game. I think you keep going with your best, but maybe Wallstedt is the best now, and yeah, that would be a fair argument. But you could make an argument either way. Exactly. There's a hot debate in Latvia. If Latvia head coach made the right decision by benching Silovs on the fourth goal against Denmark, what's your thoughts on that? I would say that, like, and we talked a little about this earlier. We've talked a lot about it in yesterday's recap video, but I personally feel that as much as you want to give your team a chance to go out and win the game, and yes, you tend to trust your offense, you also got to know about who you are. And Latvia is a defensive team by nature. They have good offensive tendencies, but in the end, they're not a team that's going to be able to score a bunch of goals. And that should be a penalty. I'm not sure why you would. Oh, Krasenberg's out front. Oh, nearly got it in. Sheila shot from the point. Oh, and that one's going to get out of play. 3:40 left to go in the second period, a 3-1 game. As I believe Latvia rather, will be heading to a power play with once again the chance to make it a 1-goal game as they approach the end of the second period. A trip on Victor Hedman on Krastenbergs for the Latvians. A lot of good chances so far for the Latvians in this period, I will say. And that's what you hope to see, especially as an underdog team, is that belief hasn't wavered. And we're seeing the Swedes take a little bit of a rest right now, and that could become definitely a bigger type problem. But Latvia will head to the power play. A huge power play for them here to see if they can get a goal here. Realistically, this game could go either way. And the upset watch would be back on. Latvia is closer to second goal than Swedes. I would have to agree with that. Assuming this power play can actually pick up a puck and not just keep shooting it back into their own end. Lachmelis wheels it up now. Let's see if he can find his way through Spolinskis. Gergensens walks it over to Lachmelis. Lachmelis down low. Spolinskis back to Lachmelis. To Spolinskis shot. Lachmelis! Oh. No one there on the rebound. Oh, Gergensens misses the wide open cage. That's got to hit the net there. You need a goal. Krastenberg's shot. Oh. Bluger out in front, nearly was able to slide that and jam that one home early. Refs finally saw something. France suspended Pierre Grinal for fighting Tom Wilson. Such a shame his fights really appear in IIHF and Olympic hockey. Yeah, I was interested. That one was actually something that was very interesting to me. Is there was no suspension, which fine. There wasn't much of a fight there. If you really watch it, they threw their gloves off and they both realized that they can't do it, and then they kind of turtled each other. But what I would say is, for Crino, he was already under scrutiny. For those who don't know, he was under shot from the point. Oh, Lachmelis wheels it back around. We'll talk about this at the intermission because I got a lot of things I want to talk about. Lachmelis down in the corner, but it won't be cleared up by Kempe. Oh, now it will be. as Eriksson Ek will dump it into the Latvian end. 2 minutes to go here in the second period. 30 seconds left on the Latvian power play. As Trailmax now dumps it in deep. Markstrom pick it up. Tries to cycle it around, but won't be able to get it out. But no, now Carlson will dump it out. Put on the stick as Zibanejad. Zibanejad takes a shot and save by Merzlikins. Feels like the first time in decades. Oh, tries to throw it out front, but can't get it through. Trailmax tries to skate it around, but won't be able to do it. Pinched off, and that'll be the end of the Latvian power play. End of the Latvian power play with a minute to go now left in the second period. 3-1 hockey game for the Swedes in the lead. They look for a late one here, which could become a real momentum killer for the Latvians. Jammed out front, shot. Oh, and Kempe misses the net. Merzlikins didn't even see it. Dahlin wheels it around. Forsling shot, jam play. Holmberg, Kempe. Wow. Sorry, that was Wenberg, not Kempe. That was knocking on the door for the Swedes. Just haven't been able to find it quite yet. 3-1 lead right now, but they were hoping to get the fourth one right before the period. Lots of high-quality chances, but unfortunately won't be able to get it done as 5 seconds left in the period. Should end it here as they will head into the intermission with a 3-1 lead for the Swedes. It's been a good game so far, and as much as both had so many chances, they really do. Are you going to watch the games live tomorrow or a recap of the day? We'll still do a recap. A recap will be coming out later tonight, so if you have not already, be sure to get your questions in. You can find those in our, I believe they're calling it community section still, or maybe it's our post section of our channel. So be sure to get those in so we can have lots to discuss on our recap video tonight. 4 games to talk about within the day. The question is, can we tie the game? I hope so. That would make for some great content and some hopefully they can. But anyway, we'll be doing our recap video coming out tonight, probably an hour or two, maybe 3 after the game is done. Only if the time was longer. That's the beauty of hockey, is you don't have all that much time. I will say though that a 2-goal lead going into a period in a game, especially like this, it's not over yet. And as long as you're within the goalie pull threshold, which I'd say is 2 goals, the Latvian desperation can get them through. And you even look at this Swedish team so far, they haven't played a great tournament, and it wouldn't surprise me to see it end on something kind of ridiculous like a 3-goal comeback or a 2-goal third period comeback. So I wouldn't count them out quite yet. Your sleep schedule must be cooked. What's the time in Canada? Right now it's 4:40 p.m. In the morning or afternoon, evening. The days start at 6 a.m., so it's not terrible. And typically our post will be up around midnight, so you get 6 hours. It's good enough. The question is, can we tie the game? Nope, did that one. But oh yes, the Crino point. So with the fight, I did find it very interesting to see how that all went down. I'd say, yes, I mean, as a Canadian fan, I'm happy Tom Wilson didn't get suspended. I have been very against Tom Wilson on this team since the very start of this tournament. I think he's a liability more than he's going to help the Canadian team, especially as this tournament goes onward. But I will say that I think he realized it more as soon as he dropped the gloves that, hey, I can't do that. And that was good to see him do that because he had some recollection of it, and then he got thrown to the ground and then he went crazy. But it was good to see him at least understand that. And it's 940 in the UK, somewhere between 140 and 440 in Canada. Yep, 440 where I am at least on the Eastern time. Yeah, it's about 6 hours behind Central Europe, or Central European time, I believe is what it's called, and then 7 hours behind Latvia. And yeah, that's the majority of the time zones. In Sweden, I'm pretty sure 6 ahead of us. So yeah, I mean, we look Tom Wilson as the penalty merchant, and that's what I was kind of concerned about. And you think about his game; he's such a bruiser type player that you run into him, and it can be a real hurt to try and find your way through, as they're showing Canada now at practice. Brad Marchand is expected to be back in the lineup in tomorrow's game against the Czechs, and you think about his game and how he's going to contribute in their game against the Czechs, and it's another guy who's going to get in your head. And we saw it 2 days ago's time when the U.S. took on Germany, and Matthew Tkachuk was in Leon Draisaitl's head all day long. It's crazy to think, as they're showing Tom Wilson's fight now with Grinnell, and you look at that, and I mean, it's such a disaster, right? Like, the fact that he dropped the gloves, sure, like I can appreciate that, but Grinnell getting, and there's other stuff going on, and I think someone just put it in the chat what ended up happening. He's facing criminal charges for punching a goalie in the French league, which is why he got suspended, because they didn't want him doing that again it's almost midnight for Latvia. Well, I appreciate everyone tuning in. I was thinking that the stream might be a little late for the European side, as it is actually the majority of our viewers on this channel. It's about 75% European, so it's always great to see. He brings good physicality, though, which can be valuable situationally in intense games. Yeah, it's true. But it's also, how are those games going to be called? And he's more so, you look for Marner, Crosby, and Stone. I don't think that's changed. So it does appear that they've gone a little bit closer to their Four Nations line, where they have, where's McKinnon in there? There's no McKinnon in that lineup. I would assume that he's just on, because he also got hurt yesterday. So we'll see if there's any kind of impact for a guy like Nathan McKinnon, because he would be a huge loss for the Canadians if he's not able to play. And that would be, I don't want to say a disaster for them, but it would be a huge loss if the Canadians don't have Nathan McKinnon going into the playoff rounds at this tournament. He did get hit and kind of got that bell ringer hit earlier in that game against France. And so it'll be tough to definitely beat the U.S. without having one of your best offensive players, but it should be interesting. School today at 7 a.m. Wow, I appreciate the dedication. But we will now, I do want to talk quickly as well. We talked a little bit on the last segment. For those just joining us, a reminder that the winner of this game between Sweden and Latvia will go on to play the U.S. in that quarterfinal round. All the teams are then reseeded. And so unbelievable. Crosby is playing at the level he's playing, bro. It's 2 years from a retirement home. And the other guy I'd add in there is Brad Marchand as well, right? Two guys who are basically on their last legs on this Canadian national team, but still huge pieces to the squad. Why does Canada have mid-NHL goalies these days? I mean, it's weird, because what I'd say is they're some of the worst goaltenders until it becomes Game 7 or becomes a very important game. And then all of a sudden they become arguably some of the best goaltenders. Guys like Jordan Binnington, or guys like, I mean, you can even look at Logan Thompson, who he's had a much better year, I'd say the last kind of year and a half, ever since Four Nations roster got announced, and he's definitely earned a spot on this team. But it's very difficult to go against Big Game Binnington because of the way he plays. And I assume Bennington will get the start tomorrow against the Czechs. Right, you have the day gap as well into the semifinals, where you have the 2 days in between there where you get the rest day and then you'll play again. And so I would assume Bennington gets all 3 starts, assuming Canada goes all the way. If they lose in the semis, I'd expect Thompson to get the bronze medal game, or maybe even Darcy Kemper. But it'll be interesting to see how they end up playing that. Time to go to sleep here and get ready for tomorrow's Finland-Switzerland game. Well, appreciate you coming out, and thanks for joining our chat. And then Slovaks are playing Germans first tomorrow. I really think Slovakia has a great chance beating them. After that, I don't know about their destiny. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough one, right? And you look at it for the German squad, right? They have the pieces, and coming into this tournament, I would have told you that the Germans should win this game. They're the better team on paper. They have the better star talent. I'd say they're equally good on depth. Their defense, I'd say, are a little bit worse than what the Slovaks have, but still pretty comparable. And then in goaltending, the Germans do have the advantage, despite Halava having some great games so far. But for the German team, they do need to play their best game, because we haven't seen that yet, right? And they've been getting better. They've been playing better as this tournament's gone onward, but they haven't really had that standalone best game quite yet. It's definitely something, if they can find it, that would be extremely helpful for them. But I'm also not entirely sure we'll see that. Definitely something to keep an eye on there. Then Latvia really gave Germany such a good bracket, and that they really did. And you think about coming into this tournament over in Group C, where it was the U.S. standalone favorites to win the group. That wasn't a question mark at all. But then you had, well, what about the other 3 teams? Well, on paper, the Germans should beat Latvia. Didn't happen. Well, the Danes should be competitive with Germany. Yeah, I mean, they were competitive. I wouldn't say that they didn't win the game, but the Germans ended up winning the game against Denmark, probably the only proper one. Latvia should be close with Denmark, and they probably should win it. Didn't quite happen. And so it's just been kind of a weird triangle of upsets in there that wasn't, I'd say, expected. And as much as Group C ended up working out the way it did, and Latvia ends up as the bottom kicker in that spot, I do think that if Latvia goes up against the Czechs today and they play the same game, Czechs play the same game, Latvia plays the same game, the Latvians end up taking that game against the Czechs, because the Czechs just don't have that same offensive firepower. And thank goodness they finally decided to put Cervenka on a line with Pasternak. It's taken them this long in the tournament to finally realize, well, hey, what's causing us so many problems so far? Well, we have no depth scoring, so I wonder how we can fix that, aside from putting our 3 best players in the tournament all on the top line together. Really is a bit of a mystery, but I rest my case. And anyway, right, like, it's just been a bit of a frustrating tournament, I'd say, for this team. But for the Czechs, they need their best game and better against the Canadians, to be quite frank, because they haven't played it yet. They've been kind of playing better, I guess, as the tournament's gone onwards, but they haven't necessarily had that great game. And then for Germany, right, they have a good shot against the Slovaks. I don't know which way it goes. I mean, the Slovaks have shown that they're a team to compete with at this tournament. They went out, they beat the Finns off the opener, which many people, including myself, wasn't really expecting. I wouldn't say I was surprised by the result, but I wouldn't say I was expecting it by any means. And then you can kind of appeal that to any which way. And it's part of that beauty of it, right? Where if you are a team like the Slovaks, like the Germans, you understand that there is a chance for you at this tournament. So a very long way of saying that this game between Slovakia and Germany is going to be an incredible game, and one that I want to say is a must watch. And I've kicked around with making that game the live stream game of tomorrow, but we'll see. If you are interested in that, let me know. It'll probably have to work around the Canada game, We won't be going live for the Canada game. There's too much coverage here to get many people over. But if there is something that works out, be sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell. It's the same old jive, but it is worth repeating that we do kind of go live on a whim over here. And this stream was probably the most amount of time that we'll ever kind of announce it in advance. Is about a day and a half of advancement. But realistically, if the games get close, you might see us live. So be sure to hit the notification bell so you're notified when we do end up going live. But especially for a team like Canada, like the US, probably look for those games, especially as this tournament goes onward. As well, we've kicked around the idea of gold medal game for the women's side, maybe the bronze medal game, assuming Canada's not in it on that Saturday, something that we might be doing. So once again, hit the subscribe button. I know most of people watching this are of European in some fashion, whether it's Latvian, Swedish. I know we got a lot of Czechs, a lot of Finns, a lot of Germans and Slovaks as well. Can Germany upset Slovakia? It's so weird calling Germany underdogs. I wouldn't necessarily classify Germany as underdogs, and I know that that's kind of how you have to make it out to be, considering how well the Slovaks have played this tournament. But the Slovaks are only in this position because they played one good game against the Finns. Because if you really think about it, right, they've played a great game against the Finns, won 4-1. Then it came down to, well, they look across the group, and the Finns and the Swedes went 4-1 as well. They beat Italy 3-2. That game was honestly tight to the very end, and I know it's 3-2 and it is a tight game, but could have very well went either way in that game. And then you have the other game there, where for the Slovaks against the Swedes, the only reason why they're happy with the loss is because they got their one goal at the end after being completely dominated in that third period, where that was a Hail Mary play that ended up working out for them. So as much as, yes, I mean, you can be happy with it if you're the Slovak team. I'm not sure you're overly thrilled about that final performance, but hey, they get the win. What more can you really ask for this squad? And then into their game against Germany tomorrow. I don't know. I still want to take Germany because they're the better team on paper. They have the better star talent, and that tends to be the question mark at these tournaments. Yes, Juraj Slafkovsky, great player. But is he going to be the exact reason why they end up coming back? I'm just not quite sure. I'm not entirely convinced that they are, but I could be wrong. I very much could be wrong, and honestly, I kind of hope I'm wrong because I like upsets at these tournaments, and whether you classify the Slovaks being Germany as an upset, that's on you. But I mean, realistically, I would classify it as such. But anyway, I'm gonna plug it one more time. If you are new here, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, please. It helps the channel a ton, helps get this video live stream out to more people. And be sure to vote in our chat feature about who you think is going to win this game. Yes, it's a 3-1 game, but it doesn't really matter if you're cheering for either side. Be sure to let me know in the comments as well. We watching USA Latvia tomorrow. Watch Mella's hat trick in the third. Well, I'll make you a deal. If the Latvians end up pulling this one off, we might be live for it, and that would be an incredible game to watch. We'll make sure that for our Swedish friends, I'm sorry. So we'll see. And it's part of the beauty of these tournaments, right? And it's one of the reasons why I love covering international hockey, because it doesn't compare to the NHL. It doesn't compare to league play, because the upsets aren't quite the same, right? Where you will never see an upset to the magnitude of teams like Latvia going up against Sweden in league play, because even the best teams in league play, and I'll take the NHL for example, teams like Florida going up against teams like, I don't even know who's the bottom, Nashville, even those games can go either way, and it wouldn't surprise you to see it. But you think about this tournament in particular, and especially the Olympics, where it's best on best, and I'm so happy best on best is finally back. But it's just so great to see best players in the world, because the upsets are just so much better, to be completely honest with you. So We are just about back underway here for third period action of Latvia and Sweden. 3-1 lead for Sweden as we do now head into the third period. Where are we here? There we go. Third period action about to kick off underway. Sweden and Latvia in Milano Cortina, Italy. And I'm curious, for those who are watching in the chat, I'd love to know, what other Olympic events do you watch? What's your go-to? I know mine is typically either skeleton or bobsled. And then Silovs will stand on his head with 42-42 in the U.S. and Latvia will win 1-0. To be fair, that's how you would expect that kind of game to go. Is we are back underway now for third period action between Sweden and Latvia. We'll see if the Latvians are going to be able to shut down this early surge from the Swedes. I do expect them to come out relatively hot, but it'll ultimately come down for the Latvians if they can shut it down. As shot on net saved by Merzlikins, as play up here by DeGurgensons. Shot from Blugers, kicked away by Markstrom. This could be interesting. I will say that if Latvia can pull off the upset, Owen save by Merzlikins could become one of the best upsets, I think, in recent history at this tournament. And I mean, it also helps that, of course, NHL players haven't been there, so that argument is probably a little bit more accurate. But it is exciting to see teams like Latvia being so competitive at these kind of tournaments, especially when the best players in the world are here. Bobsleigh, skeleton, and downhill skiing. So pretty similar, actually. I always find it very interesting to see kind of the countries that are that are good at each different sport, and you can kind of see it by region. Like the sliders typically are Germany and Owen. Krestenberg's back door. No, turned away or just missed wide. Phil Manis all alone. Cannot find the net. Hey, do you think that Slovaks have medal chance? I would say that the Slovaks actually have a very good medal chance at this tournament. And you think about why that is because their path in is extremely easy. Because you get to that semifinal round and anything can happen, where you're basically looking at, assuming this tournament works out as it should, you have Canada or the U.S. in that semifinal, and then depending on how that, it would be probably the U.S. or the Swedes or Canada, whoever it might be, in that semifinal. And then from there, you're going to have to beat whoever the extra team is. So whether that be the Finns, the Swedes, the U.S., Canada, I do think that in a one-game knockout, you could very much see them get that far, because if they can beat Germany, their chances go up significantly. They're going to play a team that they've already beaten once at this tournament, likely in the Finns, assuming, once again, this tournament works out as it should. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see that the Slovaks make a mark at this tournament, because they are very good. I think Slovaks will play Finland for the bronze but lose this time. I would agree with that. Like, you even watched that game, and as much as, yes, the Slovaks were able to find offense, the reason why they won was their goaltender, because he was wicked hot in that game. And really the only reason why they got as close as they did. So I do think that laughing away cannot find the back of the net there. Gurenson's now down in the corner fighting for it. I am interested to see now for the Latvians, how much of that desperation factor are we going to start to see? Because we saw it a little bit in that game against Denmark. And as that game went onward, the Latvians really took control of that one. And especially for a team like Latvia, where they are a defensive team and they're known for that, and that's just how they play the game. At some point when you're losing, you have to find a way to push back. And that is going to be the biggest differentiating factor in this period for them, is if they can get back into this game. Hey, Nick, good to have you by. What are your thoughts on the What are your thoughts on the day so far? I'm curious. So Wenberg now comes up with a big hit there by Mamchits. Another big hit by Mamchits. Lindholm cycles it around to Carlson. Carlson dances on the line. Kind of comes in. Jam play. Nope, no go for the Swedes. Latvia will now cycle it out. Dumps it in. Oh, funky. Oh, hit off the side dasher. I thought that one almost went in for. We've talked quite a bit about that kind of fluky goal that the Swedes always seem to give up. That was nearly it. Hopefully we'll not lose. I'm getting some kind of feeling that we can perform miracles. Like when we are expected to lose, we can surprise, but in an easy match, we often have problems. That's always fair, right? And it's also, when you come into games against upsets, it's that mentality factor too, because you know that there's no pressure, right? And even if you play your best possible game, it doesn't mean you end up winning. And when the pressure's on the other team, you can sometimes just outwill another team, because as the game goes onward, especially if they struggle to find the net early, or your opposition struggles to find the net early, you can see that comeback type mentality take form. And the belief as those games come onward, that's where it becomes so dangerous. And nearly scored on that one. Just wide of the net for the Swedes. But once again, it can very well go either way, and I think that's part of the beauty of these tournaments. Is it honestly could go either way, right to the very end. Great Britain with no mountains, frozen ponds, nor any snowstorms is not a winter sports nation. Only 15 Winter Olympic golds ever, 13 of them figure skates, skeleton, and curling. Well, I mean, curling's pretty big over there too, and I know it's big in Canada as well. I know our women's team, and actually our men's team too, had a little bit of controversy over a little bit of double touch, but still, I know they are pretty good. I think it's the women's team's going for a medal or a gold this year. The men's team's decent too, but Markstrom plays the puck. Oh, that could have been very ugly. Switzerland, Italy plus Germany, France. Nothing out of the ordinary, but 2 games closer than thought. That's fair, I'd say. I think the Germany-France one, a little bit more to expected. I think I actually predicted that game perfect as far as final score goes. Forsberg to Pettersson. Pettersson shoots. Cannot get it through, though. Oh, high stick. They call it? Nope, no call on that one. Czechia and Denmark. This was fun. I didn't really have a preference as who to play in the quarters. I think both will be a challenge. I completely agree. And and I'll talk about this later tonight, but it's 2 very different demons too, right? And you think about it for the Czechs, you think about it for the Danes. The Czechs are Canada's nightmare at the juniors, and they have been problems for them for the last few years. That's 3 in a row, losing to them in the quarters. Zibanejad, oh no. Dahlin Zibanejad and scores. Sweden takes a 4-1 lead in this one. That might be the dagger, folks. Yeah, that's a real tough goal to let up. Chance going back the other way. And that's what we've talked about a little bit, right? When it comes to that desperation factor for the Latvians. Playing outside your system, it has to be done. But unfortunately for them, it does lead to these kind of chances. When you play against really good offensive teams, they're going to expose you. And once again, this goal, Zibanejad off the rush, Raymond to Zibanejad, it's very difficult to kind of pull your way through. Czechia, Denmark. Yeah, we talked about the Demons. You have the juniors the last 3 years for the Czechs, and then for the Danes, the men's worlds from last year, which I'd say most Canadians might not be privy to that loss, especially at the men's world championships. Not necessarily the most favored tournament for for Canadian fans, but still a loss to them at that tournament. You had Celebrini, you had Crosby, you had McKinnon, you had Binnington on that team. So, and Parenko as well, I'm pretty sure was on that one. Sanheim, I believe, was as well. And so it was a tough... and what happened there? Zierkaus looks like he might be heading to the box. Sweden might be heading to the power play here. They kind of took them out too quickly. But obviously it would be a tough road to try and pick between who you'd rather. Czechs rode their luck against Denmark. Such a shame for Denmark, but the Czechs are more of a challenge for Canada. I would agree, and I think just with the way that the Czechs are built, they are going to be a tougher team. And if the Czechs can get a hot goaltender, if Joe Stahl can play the way he normally would, obviously that first game against Canada, a bit of a disappointment, I'd say, kind of that competitive factor. It should have went either way, and that game was a lot tighter than most people probably give it credit for. But unfortunately, the Czechs didn't get the bounces. Canada did, and that's why that game ended up as bad as it was. And so I would agree that the rematch between the Czechs and Canada going to be a real tough game for the Canadians, and one that I'm not sure they're prepared for, but it'll be interesting for sure. Maybe an out-of-topic question, but if Russia would be able to play IIHF, would they be as good as before? Like, would they still be gold competitors? I don't know if I've answered this on here, but I'd say that the men's side, they'd lack center depth. They have the best goaltending in the world. Their defense are good enough, I'd say, but their center depth is just not there. And I think that would be their differentiating factor and why they wouldn't be as good, is because you go up against teams like Canada. They have three or four of the best centers in the world. The U.S. team, same thing. The Swedes, very similarly. The Finns, if Barkov's there, I'd say the exact same. But it'd be interesting for sure how they'd fare as far as the men's side go. The women's side, I'd say they'd be around the top 5, kind of. Oh, and Latvia is actually on the power play off that exchange. Elias Lindholm in the box for the Latvians. Shot, backdoor, jam play, not there. Oh, and a good little passing play by the Latvians to keep the puck in the zone there. Krastenbergs, Blugers, Balinskis, Lachmel's backdoor jam play. Cannot find it. Tries to jam again, but can't find the back of the net. Markstrom standing tall on that one. Krastenberg's shot just wide of the net. Lachmelis now. Balinskis shot by Lachmelis and way over the net. And then back to the women's point for the Russian team, if they were to play, likely around that 4th or 5th spot. Slightly worse than the Swiss, I would say, and that's a pretty confident worse than the Swiss. And the Swedes this year as well have been a pretty nice surprise, I'd say, on the women's side. And they'll compete for the bronze coming up in a few days' times. And that'll be a big game, I'd say, especially for the Swedes, who have had a bit of a tough ride these last few years. And a lot of politics have been kind of played into their – politics might not be the right word, but into their system as far as the women's side, where they haven't got the same amount of funding. And so it's been good to see them kind of rise back over the last few years. And the addition of the PWHL helps a lot. And it is good to see another competitive team in the mix. Yes, their game against the U.S. wasn't great, but they were competitive in that one too. And they got a few bounces going back the other way. Between them, the Czechs, both teams on the rise. The Finns are always a competitive one, at least for the bronze medal. And so I would say that it is good to see everyone kind of back in the right kind of space, but it is still definitely a tough sled for all of those teams. Where else are here? It should be the same. KHL, second best league. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, like it's starting to become a little bit worse. I'd say. Like the Finnish Elite League is definitely climbing. The Swedish Hockey League is still climbing as well. Pettersson all alone. And a save by Elvis Merzlikins. Good save there. That could become a turning point in this game as the power play, 15 seconds left to go on it. We'll see whether or not the Latvians are going to have one last major chance here. Finland is always strong. Switzerland is up there. Czechia is fast improving. And Sweden wasn't going to stay down forever for sure. Nick summarizes it perfectly there. I would also say that the Finns and the Swiss are two teams for me that and I'm aware that the Swiss just brought Canada to a 1-goal game yesterday, but they're not necessarily considered contenders with Canada and the U.S. The Canadians are about to go through a whole shift, and their team this year isn't good. And realistically, they're about to get blown out on the 19th against the U.S. because they are a slower team. They're an older team, and I'm not sure we realized just how much of a difference there was. But after rivalry, I think that gap has really been shown. In the opening game of the Olympics, a 5-0 loss. It's a tough one to come back from for a Canadian squad. But Girgensons now brings it up. Girgensson shoots. And a good save by Markstrom. Denmark beating Canada that time was a fever dream. It was something like that. More of a haunting for whatever that equivalent is for the other side of that debate. I wouldn't say I was overly happy with that loss. And we had quite a few words on our day recap for that game. It was pretty sure it's actually one of the games in our intro now with that, because every single huge Canadian loss ends with some sort of talking point for sure. I'm not a big expert on the women's IHF, but one of my friends argues the Russian Olympics is good because they would miss IHF experience, but I don't think it'd be such a big change. I think there would be a bit of a swing, and part of the problem is we don't really know, and that's the beauty of it, because a lot of it's based on assumptions, based on, well, would these players even play well together, because that's part of that Russian style is they play and they know where each other are, and it's the old Soviet style that you build up a lot of the chemistry, and you build up a lot of the chemistry when you're young too. And so with a lot of the NHL talent, they might not necessarily have that. Yes, some of the better players still can find their way, but Raymond's shot just misses the net. And so it'd be interesting for sure. On the contrary, Britain is the third most Summer Olympic medals behind USA and Soviet Union. Night and day. Yeah. I mean, it's also like you have to appreciate that there are differences in sport. Like, I even look at soccer, football for our European friends. There's a huge difference between, and Canada's catching up, but there's a huge difference between soccer, football in Europe and then North America, where it's not necessarily as favored, and that is part of it too. And I'd say the game is definitely growing here, but it's not anywhere close to what it is over in Europe. And so it carries forward for these Olympics, right? And whether or not you're a summer sport nation, or you're more of a winter sport. Like Canada, I'd say, is a pretty winter sport oriented. Don't get me wrong, we have some good summer Olympians and Olympic events, but predominantly it's a winter nation. Power play Latvia. Oh, I forgot to take that off. 9:23 left to go in the third period here. Sweden does lead 4-1 the score. We'll see whether or not they're able to get that next goal and bring this one within 2 and kind of bring it within striking distance, really. Trip. Oh, that's going to be a tough one. Swedes work it back out the other way. Raquel. Over to Pettersson. To Forsberg. Can't quite find it. A big hit there. Oh. There's a penalty coming up on the play. Sweden will head to the power play. I didn't catch what the penalty was for, but it does appear that the Swedes will head to the power play, as this one is starting to look like it may be over. And one more thing I will say, I've said it before on the stream, but I'm going to say it again. Be sure to leave a comment on our post, which we put out asking for your thoughts and questions on the day. I'd love to have everyone involved in that, which will have a recap video coming out probably about an hour or two, maybe a little bit longer after this game is done. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to rest my voice a little bit more, especially after the stream, but it will be shortly after that. So be sure to go check and leave a comment on that post, as well as hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you're liking what you're seeing, because makes us do more of these things. And please do hit the like button and share with your friends to help get this stream out to more people. It does help a ton, as I know we are competing with a few different streamers across the network. But if you have not already, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and follow us on all our social media platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X. All of those you can find at On The Fly 1515. And yeah, that's my subtle plug for the day, as we are coming back to a Swedish power play. I do believe as Zibanejad is taking the ice, which should mean that yes, it is a Swedish power play. This game has gone by pretty quick, actually, all things considered. And I was at work when Denmark beat Canada. I was also at work that day, Nick, and it was not a great day for sure. As Blugers does go to the box for a slash. We'll see now. 8:30 to go left in the third period. Sweden does lead 4-1. Raquel shuffles over to Forsberg. Karlsson whiffs on it. Puck bounces around, but it will be cleared out to center. As we do take a look at the medal count, the overall medal count, Norway with 31, Italy with 24, and the USA with 21. Canada has 12. They're in 10th place for the overall medals at this tournament. Soccer takes on a far more tribalistic nature than other sport. No one else representing your hometown without ever winning anything ever. Yeah, that is the beauty of it. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about the promotion relegation, is just how loyal you get your fans to be and how big it is when they actually end up getting promoted. It's really cool, because it's a little bit different than North America, where you get promoted, or you win the championship, or you come last and you get a good draft pick. So it's a little bit different than having to play for your lives on the biggest stage. So it is cool. Picked off there by Krastenbergs, but still cannot generate anything off that. As Eriksson Ek comes back, picks up the puck, move it over to Kempe. Raymond dumps the puck in deep now. It's Eriksson Ek. 25 seconds to go in the power play. Seven minutes to go left in this third period. Eriksson Ek shuffles it around to Dahlin at the point. Dahlin over to Raymond. Raymond cross crease to Nylander. Nylander shoots blocked out front. And it will be cleared down but kept in by Rasmus Dahlin. Raymond picks it up. Passes to Nylander. Nylander all alone in front and scores. Right as the penalty does expire. 5-1 for Sweden. And that might just be the dagger. Going to be real tough to come back from it now for this Latvian team, and this one feels like it has now gotten out of hand. .6:42 left to go in the third period. Sweden with their fifth of the game. Raymond passes it off to Nylander all alone. I believe Dahlin with the secondary there. But a nice move, forehand, backhand, and roofs it. I guess doesn't roof it, but slides it within the post. Does appear that Sweden will be heading on to the quarterfinals, where they will take on the USA. That'll be a real good game coming up tomorrow. And we'll see whether or not the US is going to be able to not pull off the upset, because I don't want to say it's pull off the upset, but the Swedes kind of more or less the underdogs in that game, because I just look at the way this tournament's gone for them, and I think this game in particular is going to be that kind of game they were looking for. I never rated Latvia's hopes. And I'd say that it was never high. And as soon as they got this draw with the Swedes, and it's like Canada, right? Where for the Latvians, I think if you can always pull off one upset at these tournaments. It's always difficult to pull off two of them. And I think that they very well could have beaten the Czechs. I don't think that game was as much of a complication as this game is against the Swedes. And then you go and play Canada, and who knows, right? Maybe you can pull it off, but I think they are going to look back on the end of this tournament and say, well, what happens if we didn't end up pulling our goaltender? Because it's a huge part of this game that all of a sudden could very well be the difference maker. So anyway, it's one goal is the difference between Sweden being the 3 and Sweden being the 7. That's exactly right, and it's crazy to think, but it's unfortunately it just kind of screws over their seed. And if you even put Latvia up against the Slovaks, I think, or if you put the Slovaks up against Latvia, I think that this game is a lot different. I think that the Latvians all of a sudden have the potential to move up, and they have a very good chance at moving up. But unfortunately, as the 10 seed, they get the worst draw they could have. In order to get to that gold medal game, because France and Italy are both out now, you'd have to go through Sweden in the qualification, then you'd have to go through the US in the quarters, then you'd have to go through Canada in the semis, and then you'd have to go through probably Finland or the Swiss or Slovaks, Germans, depending on who comes out there in that gold medal game. And so very difficult path for the Latvians. Hope's not really that high, especially after what they saw with their draw, but it was something today. Disappointing to see, I guess, but good to see. Good to see the Swedes back on track at this tournament after a relatively tough start to the tournament for them. Five to 1 game here. 5:40 left to go in the third period. And yeah, I mean, you're kind of looking ahead now to see what's to come, and we'll wait for the next break, as I do believe that this will be the last commercial break here. But you look at this game for both these teams and kind of to expectation, right? And we had some earlier surprises, I'd say, with of course the Italy and Switzerland game, where that one was maybe a little tighter than most people might have given it credit for, but like Latvia, more of that defensive team going up against the Swiss, who have been waiting in the weeds to have that breakout type game. And I think the Finns are going to be very much surprised. The Swiss and the Slovaks are two very similar teams as far as their composition is made up. And so I am excited to see that game tomorrow. I think that's going to be one of the better games that we're going to see. But still, should be interesting. Should be an exciting game for sure. But as there are now 5 minutes to go inside the third period. And this is one of my favorite topics of discussion as we get into the final 5 here, is do you pull your goaltender? Because you can make the argument for it. I mean, what's the difference between a 6-1 loss and a 5-1, or a different loss? And so I'd say you might consider it, but realistically, I think it is just a few too many goals of a difference. 4:30 now left to go, as they are putting out their top line for the Latvians, and they got Schmitz out there as well on the back side, more their offensive defenseman side. Merzlikins comes out to play it, touches it in the trapezoid, doesn't get called. I don't believe that the trapezoid rule might be in effect for this tournament. I can't remember. Schmitz over to Lachmelis and cleared back out to the neutral zone. Pontus Holmberg over to Alex Wenberg. Cycles it in down deep. Over to Holmberg. 4 minutes to go. Ekman Larsson shot. Here comes Krastenbergs all alone. Shot save by Markstrom on the breakaway attempt. And that will likely do it for this Latvian team today. Tough game for them in the end, but still, lots to be proud of for the Latvians in this one. Definitely take a lot home as far as kind of the expectation factor goes, but I do think that there is lots to be proud of for sure, especially at this tournament where they pulled off probably the upset that no one really was expecting them to be able to do, right? Think about it coming in, they were relative underdogs going up in that Group C where they're going to have to go through Denmark and Latvia, or Denmark and Germany, and they got through Germany. Unfortunately, just found themselves on the wrong side of the matchup against the Swedes, and one goal, as our friend Nick, the IHF fan, loves to point out, because it very well could have been a completely different game for them had it been just a little bit different. Is picked off in the neutral zone, and it does seem like the Swedes are starting to put out some of their more defensive players, and that's kind of expected, right? Like, they're not, and maybe you can call them their worst players if you'd like. Well, Markstrom. And then the question becomes, right, back-to-back games going up against the U.S., you'd assume Gustafsson would be the goaltender. Whether or not they go with that, and a turnover in their own end. Holmberg picks up the puck for the Swedes, dumps it down deep, as there are now 2 minutes to go, or 2:10 left to go in the third. Shot from the point from Carlson, tipped out, but will not go. Carlson now takes it up, walks the line. 2 minutes left to go in the period, and it will be a bit of a tough go going forward for the Swedes, right? Think to what they have coming up for them. It's going to be a tough ride. You're gonna have to go through this. You're gonna have to go through the Czechs, you have to go through the U.S., then most likely against Canada, and then likely against your rivals in the Finns. If there's any shot at going for gold at this tournament, still a potential, right? And I wouldn't say that you have to write them off quite yet, but there is a decent shot for the Swedes to still be the gold medal favorites for this tournament. Coming in, they were among the big four. They were among the big three. They had one of the best teams, and the tournament rolled around, and all of a sudden it just seemed a little bit too far out of potential. But now this game has kind of shown and reminded everybody as we enter the final minute that the Swedes are a team to beat at this year's tournament. And of course, we will now see whether or not they are able to pull off that big upset and come out and all of a sudden play for a medal. If they can beat the U.S., semifinal hopes and dreams. And it's crazy to think that we're going to see two of the best teams at this tournament go head-to-head right in the quarterfinals. But one goal separated them from a much easier road in. But with the win today, they're one step closer to their goal. We have 20 seconds left in this one. One last thing, one more quip from me. Please do hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment on the video, and be sure to come back later tonight for our day recap. Thank you all very much for watching. As Sweden does take home the win in this qualifying round action, a 5-1 victory over Team Latvia, and they will move on to the quarterfinals to take on Team USA. A great win today from the Swedes, and unfortunately for Latvia, their tournament will be cut short after a questionable decision in that preliminary round game where they went with pulling their goaltender against the Danes. Ends up costing them, as they did play a really good Swedish team today and fell on the wrong side of it. Your final today, 5-1 for the Swedes over Latvia. If you have not already, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you liked it. And until next time, See ya.